It's been weird. But when hasn't it been? Hello, I'm Chanel, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. This is episode 39 of the pipernell podcast. So I am a knitter, spinner, designer, and now also a weaver on the fringes of craft and science, just figuring my shit out in Boulder, Colorado. I feel like after almost next episode will be the 40th, I think I finally figured out a tagline. Just figuring my shit out. So on social media, you can find me obviously as Pipernell, Pipernell, most everywhere. So Instagram is where I'm pretty active. I'm also on Ravelry under that username. Feel free to friend me on there. My designs are published under my legal name, Chanel Wu. That's Shanel, space, last name W-U. And I also have a Facebook page if you're more predisposed to keeping up with things on Facebook, where I'm also Pipernell. You search up Piper space Nell. You'll find me there. So yeah, it's been a wild ride so far. So I did not get an episode out in September, I guess, but for a breakdown of what I've recently been doing. So I'll start off some news and logistical administrative things, and then what I've been knitting, what I've been spinning, a bit of what I've been weaving. I have acquired some stuff, mostly books, as you might tell from the title of this episode. I've been consuming some media, so I have an on my radar section this time, and then after that you can go. Not that I can really hold you prisoner. Maybe I can, who knows. So let's start off with news. So the first thing I want to cover is the design pipeline has been very clogged up and not moving, so I'm going to try to get it moving. As of this episode / whenever I post on Instagram and elsewhere on the internet, I'm kicking off the test knit for the hashtag #TabaSocks, which stands for There and Back Again, which is a sock slipper design that I've been working on for a while now. I've been sitting on the pattern. I think the real thing that's kept me from sending out a call to test knitters was I was working on some hand-drawn diagrams, and I feel like, I can get that. Okay, maybe if I put the call out there, I will have the kick in the ass to finally send out the formal call. I'm actually wearing them right now because it's a little cold. So these are the socks slippers. You start, basically they're knit in the flat. There are no short rows. And you basically knit down the front of the foot. You decrease down to the toe, and then you start turning around and joining as you go to fill in kind of the other face of the sock. In that way, you go there to the toe and then back up again to your ankle. So yeah, I need to get the test knit out there if you're interested. I expect about a 2-week test period because this is worsted weight yarn. Even if so I would expect a fairly fast knitter to claim the test spot for the largest size. But besides that, yeah, I just really want to get this thing out there, get back in the swing of testing and publishing designs in my pipeline again, and hopefully that will help. Besides that, I am helping, I guess, to run a knit-along, a cal for my Druid Circle sweater. So I am part of a D&D group called Dungeons and Drop Stitches, and we're live streaming our sessions. We're all knitters. Our campaign is quite fibery and fiber themed, and it's a really fun bunch of people. So a bunch of my party members of my fellow adventurers are knitting the Druid Circle sweater, including our illustrious DM, Melissa, who is Skananigans. And so drop on, if you're interested in knitting the Druid Circle sweater, you can go to the Dungeons and Drop Stitches Ravelry group, join their thread. You can cast on now. The cal is ending at the end of November, but if you have anything on it, we're gonna, count you as an entry. And it's really just, yeah, it's really fun to see everyone working on and enjoying a pattern that I am also really proud of. So that's the Druid Circle Cal you should join. Dungeons and Drop Stitches ends November 30th. So get those in. And then just the last update on... I'm sorry, I'm kind of sniffly today. Okay, so last news item. The Summer of Skeins spin-along has morphed into the Seasons of Skeins spin-along, and again is really amorphous, and I have no plans on ending it. It's just really fun to talk about spinning with people, and I want to see all the skeins that you've been working on. So head over to my Ravelry group, the Pipernell podcast, and post any skeins that you've been spinning on in the past couple of months. I'll be talking about some of the spinning I've been doing, and hopefully that inspires you to spin some. And that's it for news, so I'm going to go on to knitting. And let's get the elephant in the room over with, and I don't know, what do you do with an elephant in the room? You push it out. So I'll start off with the FO that I'm wearing. I'm wearing a normal, long sleeve top underneath it because it's kind of cold now. And when it was last week, it was super warm, so I was wearing this just with kind of a cute bralette underneath. But I'm wearing my finished Bolin tee, which is a Quince & Company pattern, and also the yarn is by them. The pattern designer is Layla Robb, and I knit her Des Chain tee, which was super fun, and this was also super fun. I just love her designs. I've also knit a shawl by her, which was a while ago. I hope this is not coming across as creepy, because I also followed her on Instagram, and she does not post a lot of knitting stuff on her Instagram, but it's really cool to get kind of a look into her life, what she's into outside of her craft, and how that might, you kind of speculate on how that inspires her. Anyway, so the Bolin tee, I'll stand up. It's a short sleeve t-shirt that is knit with a lacy kind of yoke and shoulder detail, which is the same on both the front and back. So you actually knit this sideways, which was really interesting and fun to do. So you cast on down here, down one of the fronts or backs, and you knit out to the side, finish that side, and then you come back and pick up stitches to go in the other direction and knit the mirror image. It's just such a cool construction. I mean, that's really the only way you can achieve this kind of lace structure. You get a very directional lace. And it also, yeah, it is super flattering. It's super comfy. There's no neck shaping. This boat neck just comes from when you're seaming up the shoulders, and the drape of linen naturally just makes both the front and the back kind of curve down into boat neck. It's about natural waist, a bit past my natural waist for me. It hits the top of, it goes past the waistband of most of my jeans, and I wear mid-rise to high-waisted jeans. I think on a taller person, on the model, it seemed a little more cropped, which is fine. I'm used to the whole idea that a crop top on a normal height person is a normal length top on a short person like me. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. I love the feeling of this linen yarn. So the yarn is Quince & Company's Sparrow. They're 100% linen fingering weight yarn, and the color is Port. So I bought this when I stopped in Cincinnati on my move/road trip, and got to see some friends there. So when I was picking out the yarn, it was the middle end of summer, and this was a very autumny color, but that's fine. I greatly prefer kind of the color palette of autumn and winter in my wardrobe compared to like a stereotypically spring or summer like colored wardrobe. So this is totally fine. I will wear this color in all seasons, and now that I have it in a very warm weather appropriate material, I will just wear this thing to death. And it being linen, I really look forward to how it will continue to kind of just soften and drape even better with time. So when I was blocking this thing, that was interesting. I don't have blocking wires, and so I pinned it out, and I tried to pin it as closely as I could. So if you see this hem here, I'm not sure if the hem would have come out any differently if I used blocking wires, because it's a straight edge. Because I pinned it, the edge kind of came out kind of lettucey looking. Yeah, you know, that's a term in fashion, right? Lettuce edge. So I really like that. It adds a little bit of frill to the side of the plain stockinette. And yeah, besides that, I knit this thing 2 gauge. It was my first time knitting with linen, as I discussed in the previous episode, so I did take care to swatch. The pattern suggested a US 4. I swatched the US 4 and I got gauge, which I usually do. But yeah, it was, I swatched with a bamboo needle, but then ended up knitting with a metal needle, my usual Chow Goose. The yarn would kind of jump off my needles sometimes, but I'm kind of used to that because I am a fairly fast knitter. So to me, it was just kind of, you know, same old, same old. And so yeah, I'm just really happy with this thing. And yeah, it's so pretty. Oh, one more kind of modification I did. So this was inspired by my friend and who's also in Dungeons and Drop Stitches, Jenna. So Melissa is also knitting it. Jen, so there's a Jen and a Jenna in our group. Jen, who is Ginger and Cotton on Instagram, is now also knitting it, where our entire group is going to have bowline tees. So when I was talking to Jenna about her bowline tee, when she mentioned how she was putting the 2 halves, the front and the back, together, the pattern calls for mattress stitch with the right sides together as you're doing the mattress stitch. This will result in what's the usual finish, not mattress stitch, sorry, 3 needle bind off. So when you hold the right sides of the piece together when you are doing the 3 needle bind off and do it, you get that chain effect on the inside. And normally when you are seaming using the 3 needle bind off, that's the effect that you want. However, because of the intentional cast on edge the cast on edge is intentionally visible in the design, and Jenna had the great idea of also having the 3 needle bind off edge visible on the finished item. So I followed that, and I really like the symmetry that it gives the look of the finished piece. So I kept on, is this the side? Focus. So I actually took the tail of the 3 needle bind off and just kind of continued doing a little chain stitch embroidery up the underarm seam over the actual seam. So the chain stitch is not giving it any structure. It's just on top of the existing seam to give that, you know, a little more detail. And yeah, again, I'm really happy with this thing. Catch me in it, and I'll probably tell you all about it and try to get you to make one. So anyway, that's the bowline tee. The next piece of knitting I have is a mostly finished object. In my notes, I was really optimistic and I put FO, but it's a mofo. So I finished knitting the tapestry commission that I had, and I need to finish it. I have some non-knitting finishing touches that I plan to put on it that are quite significant, so I did not feel comfortable calling this an FO. But last time I was working on the 2 side panels. I had shown the center panel already a couple of times, so if you're interested in seeing what that looks like and what the center of this kind of work will focus on, then please watch my previous episodes. So the 2 side panels that I have are, this one is going to go on the right of the piece. Tails are not woven in. And this one is going to, this one, making sure I show you the right side. This one is going to go on the left of it. These have been blocked. And yeah, I might, so some of the finishing touches, I might be weaving in more unspun fiber into some of these dropped stitch columns, because that's on the centerpiece. But mostly I need to be mounting all 3 panels of the piece onto some wooden dowels, and I plan to do that using, well, I need to cut the dowels down to the right length first, so I have to bring them into the workshop on campus and just kind of take a saw and go beep. And then weave in the ends that I think is necessary. In this kind of piece, the ends not being woven in can contribute to the look, so it's just kind of artistic discretion. And yeah, so with the dowels I plan to kind of crochet, kind of how some people crochet around like electrical cords, to really create that kind of wrapped look with the dowels. I don't want the wood of the dowels to stand out, and I want them to blend into the piece. So yeah, these 2 pieces turned out to be wildly different. I started them both with this garter tab and a mini top-down triangular shawl, and I stopped increasing on one side, and then on the other side I kept growing but did very different patterns in them. So this one, the right side of the piece, has a more closed patterning that's rib with some eyelet rows, and then this edging, when I reached the edging, I cast on a few more stitches and actually knit sideways for kind of a knitted on edging. So in this one, it was garter stitch with an I-cord edging, kind of going until I was out of stitches to make a kind of a very solid, grounded border. But on the left side of the piece, when I cast on some stitches, I started doing an eyelet-y, I don't know what to call these, kind of toothy edge. Yeah, it is a tooth similar to how the hitchhiker has teeth, where you're increasing on the edge, and then every once in a while you bind off a few stitches, to create the edge, the kind of flat of the tooth, and you increase again, bind off, increase again, bind off. And the teeth get smaller and smaller until they're really almost non-existent on the, kind of on the plain side. So yeah, this will probably be the last time that you see this thing. I will make sure to get a finished picture from the new owner once it's in their, kind of hung up in their home in the intended setting. But I feel really bad about dragging out this project, and I need to get this out. So yeah, that is the tapestry. So that's the only thing I've been actively knitting on is I have some side projects that have been in hibernation, but the thing I've been actively knitting on is my Klein sweater. So this is on my 2018 Make 9. I need to check in on how I'm progressing on that. But I'm knitting the Klein sweater by Julie Hoover, and it's it's one of those like kind of classics with the twist patterns. It's a bottom up in pieces raglan sweater, mostly stockinette, but it's also a dolman sweater at the same time. So dolman sweaters are the types of, dolman sleeves are sleeves that have a very wide armhole, kind of, you think the 80s, that's the huge sleeves that had almost bat wings. That's a dolman sleeve. And according to the pattern, I have not knit this is the only dolman sweater I've ever knitted, so I don't have any reference. Apparently they're mostly knit sideways, so you start at one side, you start at one sleeve, knit sideways, knit through the body sideways, and then to the other sleeve. So Julie Hoover has incorporated the dolman shape into raglan shaping by making kind of the raglan shaping very exaggerated and wide. So I have the back piece already finished, and it all of this entire length right here, that's the raglan armhole. So this thing will go, you know, pretty almost to my waist, the armhole. So that she creates the dolman shape by exaggerating the raglan shaping. And yeah, it's a really soothing knit. It's mostly stockinette. You start off with some 1x1 ribbing, and I am looking forward to having this as just a very nice cozy sweater. The yarn that I'm using is Knit Picks Andean Treasure, which I believe it's classified as a sport weight. It has a give and gauge of 6 stitches to 1 inch on the kind of an average tension, and the patterns gauge was about 19 stitches to 4 inches. So no, I'm sorry. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing up gauge is I swatched with the pattern's recommended needle size, got gauge. Again, very privileged in that I usually get gauge with the suggested needle size. But I was worried about when I swatched with the suggested needle size and the suggested gauge. The fabric felt good to me. My primary concern with using this yarn is that Andean Treasure is 100% baby alpaca. And I know 100% alpaca garments are going to grow like crazy. So if this thing is going to be, you know, kind of a boxy fit on me, but I also don't want it to droop and just become sloppy looking on me. So I then sized down and stuck with the size that I was going to knit anyways, so that the sweater is going to turn out slightly smaller. It's still going to be boxy on me, and hopefully the tighter gauge will kind of slow down the growth of the sweater, and maybe so hopefully if the sweater grows, then it'll just, you know, grow to the size that the pattern wrote it to be. And I also, when I sized down, then I realized I was at a US 6 for the main body, which is a size that I've used for this yarn before, and I really like the fabric that came out of it, so I was happy with that. So the needles I'm currently using on it are US 5 for the ribbing, and I'm using Addi Turbos for it, which are really slippery. I am honestly not the biggest fan of those needles, because also the cable is really soft and tends to pop through my work. But if it's just for a bit of ribbing, I don't mind. For the body, I am using US 6 Lika wooden needles, which I feel like has a nice bit of grab, too, for alpaca, which can be a little bit slick. Not slick, but Yeah, it can be a little bit, it's very satisfying to knit with this alpaca yarn and wooden needles. I can't really describe it. And yeah. Oh, if you're interested in the colorway of this yarn, it is Mystery Heather. It's a nice medium heathery gray that I know is a good medium gray for my skin tone. It's not too light. Mostly I don't wear like light colors well, I think. Like, I mean, I wear this top a lot, but I would prefer grays darker than this top. But that's all the knitting I've been doing that's noteworthy. So I'm going to move on to spinning. I haven't gotten too much spinning done, not since my move, which is kind of bothering me, but I kind of feel the spinning bug coming back. Or maybe it's just my sinuses, I don't know. But as of yesterday, I finished the first skein that from start to finish was spun, plied, washed, all here in Colorado in my new home. So I feel like I should definitely show this off. So here it is. I'm calling this my Yellowstone spin because the fiber, which I got from What the Flock, or WT Flock he's on Instagram by Joe, the Dyer Joe is on Instagram under WT Flock. So I bought this from him a while back, actually, probably 2 years ago now, and this colorway was inspired by the prismatic springs in Yellowstone National Park. I don't know if the lighting in my room is really yellow. The oranges come across more reddish in person here. But yeah, it's 100% superwash merino, so this is super soft and squishy. It was smooth and just really fun to spin. That's kind of my comfort zone. Hand-painted superwash merino top. Everyone has to have a comfort zone. So I think the prismaticness of the colorway really comes out in the finished skein. It's a 2-ply, it's fractal spun, so there's lots of barber pulling, but in a great way. I love barber pulling. And it's, yeah, worsted spun. I didn't do anything fancy with the drafting. But this is pretty much the finest yarn that I've ever spun. It came out to 256 yards on 106 grams. I've not measured the wraps per inch, but pretty much this looks consistently like a heavy fingering weight yarn, which is the finest that I've ever managed to consistently spin on my wheel. And I really am drawn towards finer spinning. So I'm not sure what I'll use this for. Again, I'm very terrible at using my hand spun yarn, but I did get I did get one of the faster whirls for my wheel, and I really want to see how fine I could spin on that. So yeah, I'll give that a whirl. Huh, you see what I did there? Also, more things that I want to try with spinning. I've been wanting to learn how to spin long draw and really do more of worsted style drafting and spinning a worsted yarn. Because my drafting style is, I can really only do the short forward draw, and as I'm moving forward, as I'm moving my hands in very short intervals and I'm squeezing the air out of the wool at all times, resulting in a nice sturdy worsted spun yarn. But I have some woolen prep fiber that I want to spin into a true woolen yarn to use for color work, because I love the color combination that I bought. And it's very rare that I buy fiber and a project just kind of leaps out at me. So I need to make that happen. I just need to practice. I've been using hand cards to try to make a couple of rollags. that's also been holding up my process because that's also something I need to learn. But yeah, I will try to, I want to do more spinning in the near future. Oh, and then one last show and tell. This was because I spun a 2-ply fractal. When I divided the fiber into halves, I had a little bit left over on one side. So I took that and I actually attempted to chain ply it. I'm honestly terrible at chain plying, and I think part of it is my wheel setup. So I have a Ladybug, which has an onboard lazy Kate, which is what I've been using. I feel like if I had a separate lazy Kate that was not on the wheel and instead I could place it behind me, it would help me keep tension for chain plying. Because with chain plying, with my current setup with an onboard lazy Kate, the chain plying, I have to pull it up towards me in the wheel and then let it go back into the wheel. And that motion of like bending the yarn back really makes it difficult to keep my tension even when I'm chain plying. If my single was coming from behind me, then I wouldn't have to do that bend around. And yeah, that's probably going to be my next equipment investment. So that's all I have for spinning. I'm actually going to take a quick break, but then I will be back with my weaving and talk about some of the books that I've been getting and the things that I've been watching or listening to. Okay, a little bit of weaving. Not too much weaving has occurred at work in lab, but one, because we are assembling our loom. We got it. But I've been messing around with card weaving, or tablet weaving, which is a really old form of weaving where your warp threads are controlled, raised and lowered by rotating a set of cards or tablets instead of, like a heddle or strings that raise or lower your warp threads. So structurally, a tablet woven item is different from most other kinds of weaving, in that what your cards are actually doing is twisting the warp threads around the weft. You place the weft, you twist the cards again, and the warp will twist again and lock that weft row into place. It's really interesting. I was drawn towards it because I'm like, this thing is so different, I don't understand how it works. At this point, I'm still not, I don't completely understand how it works, but I feel like it's getting there, and I'm just so drawn towards things that I don't know and things that I feel like I could figure out. So yeah, I set my mind on figuring out card weaving. So I started by making a loom because there was supposed to be one around me at work, but it was nowhere to be found. And so I saw that people have used actual playing cards to make these, so I found an old deck of playing cards. And I made them into weaving cards. So what I did was I took two playing cards, just kind of turned them corner to corner like that to mark out the square. And then I took a 3-hole punch and punched holes in all 4 corners. I tried to get them centered, but let's see, like on this one, the first hole didn't go through, so I just punched it again and made the hole a little wider. It's fine. And then I marked one of the 4 sides to just indicate the orientation of the cards. So all throughout this, I was using a book by, I think it's Candace Crockett. Last name is Crockett. It's all about card weaving, and that's where I got the pattern that I was working off of, and kind of, how to set up a loom once you have the tablets. My first kind of step 0 was just to make the tablets, the cards. So I ended up taking the entire deck of playing cards. Some of them are in use right now, so this isn't the whole deck, but that's back at work and I can't really detach it from where it's attached. So to set up, once I had the tablets, I set up the cards by warping them. So you take a card and you thread, through the 4 holes. So the holes are labeled A, B, C, and D, and I highlighted the A and B edge. So, and you always want the A and D side up when you're weaving, just because of convention. So when I am weaving, I have the cards look like this to me, and they're all lined up like that. Anyway, so once I have the cards all threaded, I set them up in a row. I tie one end, and I started by attaching it to a doorknob. Then I found that a window latch worked better. You straighten out the warps. There's kind of a process of using, like, taking the cards and running them through to comb out the warps, so that because right after you thread them up, they're all twisted up. And then you have to attach the second end to something. And I saw some pictures of someone, you know, attaching it to their belt loop. I didn't want to be locked into my weaving. Practically speaking, I can't be, because I need to get up and do other stuff in lab. So I found an office chair, and I tied it to the armrest. And the armrest, because the office chair is also on wheels, it offered me kind of the backstrap feature of being able to lean back, the chair would roll back, and then it would increase tension on the warps. If it was too tight, then I could just lean forward a bit, let up a bit on the pressure, and the tension would slacken. So the arm also gave me a mechanism to kind of like, when I was done with when I'd woven up some sort of length. So as I wove, like, it maybe would start out here by my hip, but as I wove, the work would build up and get farther and farther out, and I had to lean over it, which is bad for my posture. So I could take that extra length, wrap it around the arm of the chair, and keep weaving. And so this is the first piece, the first strap that I've ever woven with card weaving. I honestly can't tell you which end I started with. It's so cool. This was with a 5-2 pearl cotton that we had. So there's a black, a cream, and a lavender purple. And I believe we order all of our yarns from Halcyon Yarns. So that's probably where this is from. If you have a color card, you can pick out the exact colors. These were just cones that I had around lab. And so yeah, this color, the pattern is a repeat of kind of 8 moves with the cards. So you take I took the entire bundle, turned it forward 4 times, and then turned it backwards 4 times. Right now, I am playing around with a more complex pattern where you don't turn around the entire bundle of cards at once. Or you're always turning all of the cards. But in some patterns, you might, separate the cards into segments, turn some of those segments forward, turn some of those segments backwards to form a more complex pattern. And there are also more cards in the second piece that I'm attempting. And yeah, this thing was just straight off the loom. It's completely unwashed, unfinished, and already the fabric is just so, like, solid and indestructible feeling. That's the kind of twisting or twining of the warps around the wefts. The wefts that I used, so because this is a fabric where you don't see the weft, it's a warp-based fabric, you only see the warps on the surface, and the warps are creating the design. It didn't really matter what color I used for the weft. Crockett's book recommended using the same color that is the edge of the pattern, so I used black for the warp. But again, you can't really see it unless you see my uneven edge tensions, where you see little loops of the weft peeking out. Actually, that's probably how I can pick out which end I started with, because it's more uneven. So yeah, it's this end. You see how that first one is like kind of an uneven tension, because your first couple of rows, you kind of use that to set the tension of your warps and really get them even, so the first couple of back and forths might be a little wonky. So once I finished the weaving, this wrapping was just, I took the kind of end of the weft that was dangling out, cranked it around the end a few times, and then just like a tassel, you take a needle and thread it into the wrapping, and it looks great. It's like a tassel. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. This is about how much weaving I got out of 2 yards of warp, and it's a great length for a belt. I've seen people use card woven straps for sandals, which would be really awesome to have. Bags always need straps. So that's part of why I was also drawn towards card weaving, because straps have so much utility. And I love the fact that I can now make decorative ones. So yeah, I will make sure to show my second card woven piece once it's done. I was very ambitious and I warped up 4 yards this time, so that might take a while. I'm also using wool yarn in that weaving, which feels very different from weaving cotton yarn like in this one. So, yeah, the wool has a lot more bounce and spring. I actually looked at the label. It's Koigu, it's Koigu sock yarn. So it's very nice and sturdy. I definitely made sure to choose a wool yarn that was not merino and just very hardy. So I would love to use opal sock yarn, and I'm digging into like kind of the rest of my sock yarn scraps for future card weaving projects. But yeah, you don't want something that will pill and fuzz, because this undergoes a lot of abrasion as you're weaving, and you're twisting the cards back and forth, you're sliding them back and forth on the yarns. It'd be torture for a lot of knitting yarns. And I'm starting to see why knitting and weaving yarns are so different. And yeah, I'm just so mesmerized by this entire craft. And it's thousands of years old. It's one of the oldest forms of weaving, because like I did, you can use improvised materials and an improvised environment and just weave almost anywhere. So I've been tossing around the idea of kind of doing like a guerrilla weaving project where I take a card loom and I just set up in a really weird place and start like weaving messages to people because that's also a thing that people have developed procedures for weaving letters and specific motifs into tablet weaving. So you could totally just like weave a strip that says any message that you want. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this. And like I said, like that's really the only kind of weaving I've been doing. Our lab got our big jacquard loom, but it's not up and running yet. So the loom got shipped to us from Norway. It went through customs somewhere in New Jersey, probably Secaucus, because it's close to New York City, which is pretty close to where I was in New Jersey. And then it got shipped to Denver. In Denver, it had to change trucking companies for whatever reason. I don't understand these systems, but I get things happen when you have to ship a literal ton of parts in like an 8-foot by 8-foot by 8-foot cube. And it's chaos. You would think that they would communicate better, but literally one afternoon, my advisor was about to leave for the day, and she gets a call that there's a truck outside of our building in the loading dock trying to unload the loom. And we're like, what? Why didn't you give us more notice? You should give us more notice, because we had to round up a bunch of people around the department to unload it into our freight elevator. And then the freight elevator was fine, but our lab has a normal sized door, so we had to open up all the boxes, unpack it, and move it into the room piece by piece. It was just chaos. And it came in pieces, like IKEA. So yeah, earlier this week, we assembled it. I got together a new crew, and I tried to be more coordinated about it, so I was emailing far in advance. and letting people know it's like, okay, if you come around lunchtime, we'll buy you food in exchange for your muscles and energy. And we got the frame of it together, and I would say I've been kind of viewing that as the body, as the skeleton of the loom. This loom is really an organism. I mean, it costs as much as I do to my advisors, so it's you know, literally an extra body in the lab. So the skeleton is standing. I've been filling in the guts, so the heddles of a jacquard loom that allow the loom to control each warp yarn individually, and we need its nervous system. So we need to hook it up electrically. We need to hook up a computer to get the programming the kind of controller software interfaced with the loom. We need to connect it to the internet. And yeah, really, you know, we need its processing power. So that's been really interesting to really get up and close with the inner workings of a loom. And I've actually been inside that thing now, because some parts were easier to reach when I was standing inside of it. And yeah, so that's it for weaving. Weaving is always, I think weaving's always going to be the weird section where I just kind of geek out about things that I've been learning / doing, and we're already on the weird side of weaving. So yeah. So my next section, I do have an acquired section. I've been kind of going on a book binge, as the title might imply. And yeah, and there's a big yarn store near my new home. So that is Shuttles, and I went to Shuttles. They're huge. Again, they have supplies for almost every fiber craft you can think of. But I am on a yarn and fiber freeze. No, I already broke that. I'm trying not to buy yarn or fiber until the end of the year, until 2019. Because during my move, I did unpack and repack all of my yarn and really come to terms with how much I have. So I've been focusing my shopping energy on books. Lots and lots of books. So, a friend from New Jersey actually swung by and visited me. So we went to Shuttles because she's also a knitting friend. And she was looking at yarn. I went for some books. And they have a very extensive and eclectic sales section, including some very, like, old books, which I love. I would patronize the hell out of a used craft bookstore. I love used bookstores already. If there was a used craft bookstore, I would go. Because I love reading about kind of older craft wisdom, how knowledge in this field has evolved, how people have communicated it differently in the past. Because I hear things about, like how knitting magazines, they were written super compact, super no frills. This is, I expect you to know this technique and I'm not helping you with it way. Well, they were pressed for space, but also just, that was, people thought about craft differently that way, back then. So I bought a couple of books, in Shuttle's sales section. I got Knitting in the Old Way, which is by Priscilla A. Gibson Roberts. I'll put all of this in the show notes. I've been terrible about doing show notes. And that's their information. So this is a book that really guides you through, kind of folk traditions of knitting sweaters. So you have Lapland stranded knitting, you have Ganseys, you have you have raglans, just kind of what was the tradition in numerous regions. Basket weave sweaters. Some of these styles I haven't heard of. Like, that's just really cute. I want that. I want all of them. And then I also got some, pretty much they were leaflets. There's these spiral bound leaflets This one is The Knitting Architect. This was published by KFI. I don't know if they still publish books like this, because this probably is, you know, all written up into online articles or ebooks now, just kind of a PDF you could download. This is The Knitting Architect, and it has very detailed instructions on different kinds of shapings, and that really drew me in because I wanted the in-depth mathematics of certain sweater construction, multiple sweater constructions, and I really like this charting method. I don't know if like a modern knitter would make use of this kind of chart, or if they'd be totally put off by it. Is I think there has been, my hypothesis is there is a kind of shift towards verbal explanations over just a charted, like, big picture, figure this out approach. But I always like a new visual representation. And then this book was super cute. It's the I Hate to Finish Sweaters Guide to Finishing Sweaters. I don't hate it at all, but it's a nice collection of sweater finishing techniques that if I need to pick up for a reference, I can always grab this. Plus, look at that drawing. That person is not having a good time. And you can see the pixels in this, like, picture. It's just so great. I love old books. And then in that same trip, which I originally went in for, I got some colorwork bobbins, because I've been wanting to mess around with intarsia. Plus, when weaving in lab, we do tend to use very small bits of yarn. And it was kind of a pain to even use, like, a stick shuttle, which can be, like, this long at minimum. And so I was like, oh, intarsia bobbins. That's a thing. Also, tatting bobbins, tatting shuttles would be also a good yarn holder for small bits of weaving. So, I mean, that was the practical buy, and then, of course, I get stuff. So, also, the reason why I have so many books is Labor Day came and went, and a lot of places have Labor Day sales, including Interweave Press, which also is based in Colorado. I mean, do they do visits? Do they do tours? I don't know. Hi, Interweave. If you ever watch this, I would love to come by. I don't think I am. I'm a small fry. I don't know if I'm important enough to you, but I would love to come over. Oh, also, I'm displaying one of my favorite books just because that shelf's a mess, so I covered it up with a book. So, Interweave had a lot of great deals for Labor Day. So, I got a bunch. This is my pile. So, I got Respect the Spindle by Abby Frankwimont, which you probably all know is, like, a great book if you're a spinner. I actually haven't read it. I knew that I would like it, so I bought it. I don't usually buy books without having read them first because of libraries, and nowadays you can, there are so many ways you could preview a book without having to buy it. But I knew that this would be a fixture in my personal collection, my personal, like, library of knowledge, and that I would come back again and again to this. So I got that book. Next, I got 200 Fair Isle Motifs by Mary Jane Mucklestone. This was a book I have flipped through before, and I knew it would be so invaluable for any future colorwork designs that I do, because the way that it's organized is just gorgeous. It has all these motifs ordered from smallest to largest. It has a guide on how Fair Isle knitting has traditionally organized them. And, you know, it's giving you a set of rules that, as a modern designer, I am more likely to break these rules than to follow these rules, but I need to know the rules first. And it's just such a pretty book. So, yeah. I also got New Directions in Sock Knitting, which people were recommending to me after they saw my Taba socks. I'm really interested and curious about alternate sock constructions. So this book was also really cool to me. Like, I don't know how many of these designs I'll end up having time to make, but it is one of those books where I do want to make everything in the book. And then this book I have already gotten good use out of. This is the, New Directions. New Directions in Sock Knitting was written by Anne Budd. She's the first author, but there are patterns from a bunch of great designers. Kate Atherley, Kat Bordy, Rachel Coopy, Hunter Hammerson, and a bunch more. Jenny Stamen. Yeah, all these names I have come across at some point. I just don't always remember them off the top of my head, but yeah, it's like, it's a powerhouse in here. And then, okay, so I have been getting good use out of this book. This is the Beginner's Guide to Writing Knitting Patterns by Kate Atherley. I think at this point, I like to think that I'm not a beginner anymore, but I've read through this book a couple of times already, and it's confirmed that I have been doing some things right. It's given me ideas for things that I can improve on. And it's also answered some questions about things that I've been too afraid to ask. And it's, maybe I was too afraid to ask them because I didn't want to be talking to a designer and trying to kind of get free professional help from them, when I should be, kind of paying someone for their specialized knowledge and consultation. So buying a book kind of eases that guilt for me that I am kind of paying my fair share for this training. Yeah, I think that's the way to put it. That, yes, I learn a lot of things for free, but if I really should be taking a class, I should pay for that class and pay for the teacher's time. So buying a book from an author that I want to learn from, I think fulfills that. Yeah, and so she breaks it down into kind of so she starts off with pattern structure and elements, kind of like the framework of a pattern. And then you fill in a lot of these elements, so knitting instructions, charts, grading, formatting, and then she also goes into the test knitting process, submitting to a design publication, like a magazine or something, just something that I have not done yet. Copyright, so little legal nitty-gritty that maybe that a beginning designer would be totally not in the space to think about. But, it's good to have someone let you know that if you do something wrong there, it might really bite you in the ass. So it's just, again, it's a great collection of knowledge, and I'm so glad to have this book. One more. I also got the Knitter's Handbook of Top-Down Sweaters. I've already used this book. It was really helpful for my Druid Circle designing. It's by Anne Budd. So I got 2 Anne Budd books. Anne Budd's just, oh man. So smart. And I know that I will use it again. So I decided it was finally time to get me a copy of this book. So she does have the circular yoke section, which is what I used. And her brain is just wonderful. Like, she has all of these instructions laid out in terms of gauge and size. So that's why there are 2-dimensional tables. There's the date. All of those numbers are just so neatly laid out and represented that I also look up to this book as a way of kind of organizing and communicating information. And then the last book I got is a weaving book. So all of those were knitting. So I got Easy Weaving with Supplemental Warps by Deb Essen. And supplemental warps are a technique that I haven't quite gotten to explore in research. but it's already come up as a potentially very useful technique, so I thought I would get a more craft-centric perspective on it, to really ground myself in, okay, how have people carried this off for hundreds of years before we newfangled smart textiles weavers try to like hack something together. And I think that's going to be a major principle of my research as someone who's working kind of between, or at the interface of craft and technology. In the technology, we're all about the new. In the craft, we really try to recognize the history and the old stuff, and that there's a lot of wisdom in learning from your predecessors. So I want to bring that respect for the past into like technological research. That's a big statement. So yeah, that was my huge book order, and yeah, so that's all the books that I got. And then it was, I've been to Shuttles a couple of other times. It was their birthday sale recently, so I did not get books on my second trip there. It was their anniversary sale. They were having discounts on a lot of things, including shocked equipment. So I knew that I wanted to get a higher speed whirl so I could spin finer on my Ladybug. And so I did. I got a super high speed whirl. So the tip that I got, I don't mean this at all to be a kind of a burn to shocked. So shocked machining can be a little imprecise. And if you are going to buy a whirl for your shocked wheel, this is advice I got from the sales, from the staff, which I really, really appreciated. So I don't know if it's machining in the flyer shaft or machining in the whirl. I think it has to be the whirls because they're made of wood. While the shaft is made of metal, and metal tends to be a little more precisely machined. So the holes in the whirls aren't completely, well, nothing is perfectly uniform, but the tolerances on these whirls can be a little large. So that means that you should bring your flyer shaft, if you're shopping for shocked whirls, to a store in person if you can, and try on a bunch of the whirls in the size that you want. So I picked out the few super high speed whirls that they had, and I had my flyer, I broke it down for my wheel and brought it into the store and tried them on. And some of them did fit more tightly, some of them fit more loosely. I picked the one that fit tightly, but was still, I could still, remove it. It wasn't so tight that I couldn't even get it on in the first place. So yeah, just a little tip there. But I got that, since things were on sale. I also got a little tape measure. It's a pig, because I like my pigs. And then, of course, I couldn't resist getting some sock yarn, so I got a Zauberball Crazy. This colorway is, I didn't look at the colorway name before this, I'm not good. Should I try to pronounce it? Yeah, I'll try to pronounce it. Zimtschneck. I don't know. It's really pretty, though. And I want to make some funky socks with this. And then, since it was their anniversary sale, I also got another tape measure that has their logo on it. So yeah, that was some shopping that I've done. And I don't feel guilty about it because they were all really good deals. That's what I keep telling myself. Alright, that's it for acquired. So this has gone on for a long time, but I do want to talk a bit about what's on my radar, because it's been a while since I've done that. So I recently watched Get Out, which I know it's been out for a while, so most of you have probably seen it, but if you haven't seen it, you should see it. Get Out is a And it's October. It's the season. Get Out was not scary. It had like 2 jump scares that were very subtle. And yeah, I don't like jump scares either, so this was fine for me. And it wasn't even cheesy. So it was good at just kind of like throwing you off guard. And then leaving you kind of heightening the unsettledness of the rest of the movie. So for most of the movie, the horror part is just in the creepiness, the building creepiness of all the characters that you come across. And for people of color, like me, it was, some of the horror wasn't so much horror, it was just satire of how kind of horrifying some interactions can be, how interracial dating can be. I'm not black, so I can't speak to black people of color's experience. It had some very timely commentary on the state of racial tensions in the United States today. So it's really good. It also has some very funny moments. It was a very well-crafted movie too. Like I said, they weren't using jump scares as cheap tricks to make the audience scared. They built up tension using a bunch of visual cues, all sorts of like camera things. I don't know. I'm not a film person, but I could tell this was a very well thought out film, so you should watch it. And then because it is creepy season, I've been listening to a lot of folklore and mythology podcasts or discussions. So 2 recommendations I have for those are Lore by Alan Menke. And he tends to pick out more obscure stories that you might not know from the past. It's pretty Euro-American centric. But again, that's probably like he's drawing from his own context. And the music that he picks is also really soothing, so you're just kind of, I've been listening to it at night before falling asleep, just listening to creepy supernatural events and soothing piano music and falling asleep, knowing that the world is not what it seems. And then the second podcast that I would really recommend is Myths and Legends. And so this is a podcast that does draw from a more diverse set of stories. They do a lot of non-Western mythology, but they also balance that with retellings of, or they get stories that we might be very familiar with, like the Disney version of it, like Pinocchio, and they really go back to the source material and pick apart how creepy that originally was, or how messed up that was. And it's really good at giving you a new perspective on stories you already know, or introducing you to new stories that you don't know. And so I really like that. I really like the non-Western fairy tales that they do, so I want to listen to more of those. But yeah, just a lot of stories really to escape from things, and keep my head on my shoulders. There's a lot going on in the world. So yeah, that brings me to wrap up. Yeah, so been doing a lot, dealing with a lot. Last night was pretty weird. This entire week has been pretty weird. It's been kind of weird. But I'm getting through it, and you should look forward to more designs from me. If you are interested in test knitting the Taba sock slippers for me, please get in touch with me. I would appreciate you sending me your email. I'm trying to kind of systematize test knits more, so I'm thinking of creating a non-email based communication method for my test knitters. And yeah, tune in to Dungeons and Drop Stitches. If you're interested in knitting the Druid Circle sweater, we have that cowl going on. Keep on spinning. Post your skeins in the Seasons of Skeins thread. And yeah, so any other updates will be on Instagram at pipernell, pipernell. My designs hopefully will be more active soon. And I hope you're all doing okay. I know there's a lot going on. I'm not going to touch into specifics in case you don't want to think of it. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, getting lots of self-care in. Please don't self-destruct like I did yesterday. If you're exhausted, don't make that worse like I did. And yeah, I love you all. I'm trying to love myself. It's hard. So, yeah, have a great rest of your day, night, week, whenever you're watching this, whatever you need. The reason I didn't start recording earlier is because I was really allergic to something. It might have been the cat in the house, might have been weather, and I just waited. I took an antihistamine and waited for my sinuses and my eyes to calm down. My nose.